In December 1985, Lieutenant Colonel Aker Iyorshe was arrested on suspicion of conspiring to overthrow General Babangida's regime. The plan, which was still at conceptual stages, was exposed through a casual conversation at Air Force Base in Makurdi, leading to his arrest, trial and execution, along with Major General Mamman Vatsa and others in 1986. But who is Lieutenant Colonel Aker Iyorshe? Was a conspiracy even real or imagined? If there was any conspiracy at all, how did it leak? And finally, what was his last words before the firing squad went to work? In this edition of Hispo Media, I will answer all these questions and more. My name is Gabriel Adidia. Please come with me. But first, at the time he was arrested on suspicion of conspiring to overthrow IBB's regime, sometimes between 18th and 20th of December 1985, Lieutenant Colonel Aker Iyorshe was a sophisticated, young and brilliant infantry officer. Iyorshe was of the Tiv ethnic nationality in Benue State and was also of the Christian faith. He was 35 years old and married with 5 children. Iyorshe served as a directing staff, senior division army faculty at the Command and Staff College in Jaji. Interestingly, during this time, he stayed in the officers' quarters at the Nigerian Defense Academy in Kaduna. Upon his graduation from the Nigerian Defense Academy (NDA) in Kaduna in 1970, Lieutenant Colonel Aker Iyorshe was commissioned into the Nigerian Army as an infantry officer. He was an Academy Junior Under Officer (JUO) and later received the Distinguished Sword of Honor as a Best Cadet. But a moment before we continue, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to Hispo Media. It will go a long way to help us create more videos. Thank you. Let's get back to the story. Aker Iyorshe took various courses abroad, all on merit, including the Junior Staff College in Toronto, Canada, the Junior Land Force Command and Staff College in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, and the Army Staff College in Camberley, United Kingdom. He had the best performance in the Lieutenant to Captain and Captain to Major promotion exams in his badge. He and his coursmate Lieutenant Colonel M. Effion became substantive Lieutenant Colonels long before the rest of their class, perhaps in 1984. Meanwhile, early in his career, Aker Iyorshe commanded a company before becoming ADC to the General Officer Commanding 3rd Division when it was in Port Harcourt, then Colonel, later Lieutenant General T.Y. Danjuma. He was later appointed as the military assistant to the Chief of Army Staff, the same General T.Y. Danjuma, after the 1975 coup. When he returned from Camberley sometime around 1980 as a major, Iyorshe was the only major in the Nigerian Army who was posted to command a full combat-ready battalion at Birnin-Kebbi as a field lieutenant colonel. At this time, all other battalions in the country were commanded by lieutenant colonels. This battalion, 81 Battalion, gained respect under his command as the most physically fit and combat-ready battalion in the Nigerian Army at the time. His battalion was credited with being able to deploy within 2 hours of notice. In 1982, after Birnin-Kebbi, he served as Brigade Major in the Brigade of Guards in Lagos before being posted to the Command and Staff College in Jaji as a directing staff (DS) in 1984 after the Buhari coup. At the Command and Staff College, Kingston, Ontario, he was the best foreign student. When he went to Camberley, he held the highest rank in field exercises. Among all the African students that attended the Staff College, Iyorshe was the only one that was allowed to operate as a brigade commander to play the role of brigadier at major tactical exercises. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, as power was changing hands from one government to another, mostly through military coups, Iyorshe was initially not happy with the development. He was perceived to be a non-political officer, as was evidenced by his negative attitude to the 1983 coup, which overthrew the civilian government of President Shehu Shagari. However, he is said to have had misgivings about the government of Babangida, a man who he described as a master of intrigue. Yet, in 1985, he was arrested and accused of conspiring with others to overthrow Babangida's regime, which had only been in office for 4 months. But here's what most people did not know about this conspiracy. Lt-Col Aker Iyorshe was investigated by a Special Investigation Panel (SIP) team led by Captain Christopher Olufunso Otulana, who was at that time commanding officer of the Strategic Intelligence Support Group. Iyorshe had been brought to Lagos from Kaduna after his arrest a few days earlier. Beginning on December 21, 1985, the Special Investigation Panel interrogated him at a location in Ikoyi through a series of questioning and gave him a questionnaire to complete. After cautionary statement written in the English language, the military equivalent of Miranda right, he was instructed to write a statement freehand. A tape recorder was also used to record the interviews with him, but the tapes eventually became a source of controversy due to allegations that they had been doctored. Colonel Iyorshe himself repeatedly opposed the use of any audio tapes, expressing concern that he had spoken in a contorted voice that could barely be identified as his own. Further to this, he denied ever signing any tape. But that is not the catch. Iyorshe was said to have made a statement that implicated almost all the officers that were executed in that coup. Now, let us look at the statement allegedly signed by him on December 21, 1985, a day or two after he was brought to Lagos. He is quoted to have written, "I made contact with Lt-Col C.A. Oche sometime in October on matters affecting the nation. We discussed in general terms what was, we felt, a betrayal of the military, the amount of national issues and court action, the general indiscipline including the armed forces, and tribalism. Other things included the blanket release of the political prisoners, the release of Dantata and his associate, who it was established was guilty of cocaine trafficking. There were also cases of millions of money sorted away in foreign countries, incompetence in the military, and lack of professionalism. We then agreed that there ought to be a change in the country. Our discussions were with Lt-Col Bition, who in fact called me to Lagos in the first place. Bition was in possession of documents which he believed were used to spirit away millions of pounds, all in the name of equipment maintenance agreements on behalf of the armed forces, that is, the army. According to this statement, they were unhappy that those who have staged a series of coups in the country left a bad impression among young officers and were legitimizing coups in the armed forces. With those documents above, which showed all the details, Bition, Oche, and I met to discuss the matter. It is also through this statement that Major Bamidele Idowu, whose story we have covered in detail in the video displayed here, was implicated. The statement reads in part, "Back in Kaduna, I discussed the matter with Major Daniel Bamidele Idowu, also of the Command and Staff College Jaji. He also joined and agreed to participate in any attempt to overthrow the government. There were other contacts which I made in Makurdi, usually Wing Commander Benny Kelly. He also agreed and later brought in Wing Commander Sakaba." According to this statement credited to Iyorshe, there was also one useful meeting which was held in Makurdi at Colonel SVL Malu's guest house. Nothing concrete was discussed. There were disagreements on dates, conduct of operations, logistics, and above all, troops. Meanwhile, the logistics problem would bring about the fundamental twist that implicated Major General Mamman Vatsa. Here is what Iyorshe is alleged to have said in this same statement, and I quote, "The main problem of the group was mere finance and troops, as most of us had no command. It was during this discussion that Lt-Col Bition informed us that Major General Mamman Vatsa had been responsible for the little sofa used in traveling and the accommodation in Makurdi." The statement continued, and I quote, "Although Most of us did not want any senior officer involved. We eventually agreed that since we lacked the finance, Major General Vatsa's sponsorship would be accepted. We therefore worked out the requirement which Bition was to take to Vatsa. It has since been realized that Vatsa was able to provide 50,000 naira, presumably to Bition. On the operational level, Iyorshe was said to have confessed as follows, and I quote, "The operation was to involve the Army, the Air Force, and probably the Nigerian Navy." According to the statement, it was not agreed on how it should be carried out, but Bition suggested that the president was to be arrested and confronted with solid facts. He was then to make a public announcement relinquishing his position and was to be granted safe custody either internally or to any country of his choice. End of quote. However, the possibility of an all-out fight if things did not go as planned was also on the table. Even so, Iyorshe insisted in a statement that there was no concrete operational plan. He insisted that there were no other meetings that involved the whole group, but Bition and I met again to compare notes. Though there was not much to compare, and it was later disclosed that things were not promising in Lagos area. In the same statement, Iyorshe was said to have also complained about the welfare of officers and men of the armed forces. He is quoted to have said, "The welfare of soldiers is totally neglected, such as soldiers still live in batches over 10 years after the Civil War, no uniforms, no drugs in the hospitals, as well as lack of discipline in the army." Meanwhile, Iyorshe and his group had planned to invite some senior officers with honesty and credibility to rule the country should their plot succeed. Iyorshe is quoted to have said, "Personally, up until quite recently, I never believed that coups solve any problems, or else Libya would be a paradise on earth. But then things seem to get worse and worse in the country." Now, this is a twist that implicated Lieutenant Colonel M.E. Effiong. Iyorshe's statement reads in part, "Through these months, I kept Lieutenant Colonel M.E. Effiong informed of everything, and we discussed issues about the nation in general." Another person who did not know that I belonged to a group that was willing to join any group that I knew about was Lieutenant Colonel I.G. Usman. He was quite willing to participate in any change of government, he concluded. According to historical sources, this statement was signed by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aker Iyorshe on the 21st of December 1985. In the end, the question of how the coup idea leaked continued to linger in the minds of many. Now, let me tell you in brief terms how this coup leaked, as I plan to make a full video on this topic in the coming weeks. One of the most difficult aspects of analyzing the Vatsa coup plan of 1985 was discovering exactly how the conspiracy leaked. Historical sources believe that the plot originally leaked from the Air Force, despite the fact that the army was already rife with mutual suspicion following the Babangida coup against Buhari. Shortly after the Iyorshe, Oche, Bition, Ekele, Sakaba, and Bamidele group meeting of November 30, 1985 at Makurdi, Major Agboho of Army Intelligence was briefed about a rumor at the Makurdi Air Force Base about a possible coup. On December 12, Major Agboho went off to Makurdi to investigate the rumors. However, what actually set off a chain of events was a casual but ultimately costly conversation between Ahura and Indian Garba. Ahura had asked Garba whether he had heard of a plot by some persons to destabilize the government, but Garba's response was negative. Unaware that Indian Garba was communicating with military intelligence, Ahura went on to say, rather needlessly, that Lieutenant Colonel Uche was unhappy with the treatment of people from Benue State and had asked him to visit him whenever he was in Lagos. After this discussion and a series of orders, Indian Garba reported this conversation to his commander at Supply and Transport Corps, Colonel Aker, also from Thief and a distant uncle of Iyorshe. From here, the conspiracy may have leaked. I will release a detailed video on how this conceptual coup leaked in the coming weeks. Please subscribe to Hispu Media and on the bell notification so you will not miss any update. Thank you. Consequent upon this leak, Iyorshe, Mamman Vatsa and others were arrested. On the 5th of March 1986, Aker Iyorshe, Mamman Vatsa, along with 8 other officers were executed by firing squad at the Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison in Lagos. The execution was carried out swiftly despite appeals for clemency, including from prominent Nigerians and international human rights groups. Just before the firing squad went to work, Iyorshe is said to have been calm at the execution stake and is claimed to have directed some light-hearted words towards Major General Mamman Vatsa, who was tied to the stake next to his. Both men were said to have laughed. Iyorshe was executed on the birthday of his only son on March 5th, 1986. So, click here for the story of the execution of Ilia Bisala 10 years earlier. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Hispu Media. Share this video as well, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.